Yeah, well, I'm pretty much forced to commence a series of talks on Darwinism and science, I suppose. I mean, a guy who's got a lot of airtime lately is Richard Dawkins, but it surprises me. Over the years, I've become more and more surprised at how little the average person knows. The average follower of Darwinism actually knows about Darwin. I mean, I don't really go along with anything Dawkins said. I mean, I don't. The odd thing about Dawkins is he seems to have a hidden agenda, especially some years ago when he was running bus ads on the sides of buses in England saying there's probably no God, just relax, enjoy life, or something like that. And it reminds one of some things that went on in the 1960s, and I mean, Dawkins seems to have had an effect on a lot of people in just getting them to renounce or abandon Christian faith and go off and do something different. But oddly enough, there's some very similar things that went on in the 60s that Dawkins seems to be trying to do, and almost to the point where Dawkins is engaging in social philosophy and not paleobiology. I wonder whether he was ever interested in paleobiology, or whether he was far more interested in the social and philosophical ideas behind Darwinism. And this isn't really new. Now, well, see, I mean, from what you read about from Dawkins, philosophically, socially, he seems to be aiming at a 60s revival. Because, in fact, that's a lot of what Dawkins is doing is almost taken out of a 1960s counterculture playbook. I mean, but there's a new generation of young people who don't remember the 1960s, but in many ways Dawkins is very conventionally just repeating some 1960s moves, and they were God is dead. Now, where'd that come from? I mean, in the 1960s, there was, you might recall, there was a famous Time magazine article and a famous Time magazine cover, God is God dead, discussing the issues of this new counterculture in the light of the hippie movement, in the light of the anti-war movement, in the light of the new ecological movement. And what was born in the 60s was the environmental movement became an active political force, and not just the province of poets and things. And so there was the environmental movement, which did actually have some real concerns. like acid rain and that sort of thing. But there was the Vietnam War, and a lot of university students in a lot of young people in the 1960s were looking down the barrel of being conscripted and sent to Vietnam as infantrymen. To wander around in the jungle being targets for the Viet Cong. I mean, there was a lot of things that were disturbing in the 1960s. But along came the hippie counterculture movement, which had ideas like free love and slogans like "Make love, not war." And they had this idea of, there's a famous slogan, "Tune in, turn on, drop out," or some variation of that, which was about just smoking pot or taking psychedelic drugs like LSD and abandoning the rat race and abandoning the rat race, leaving college, joining a commune or something, just joining the counterculture where everything was beautiful and everything was easier. Now, this was the 60s move because there was that side, there was the hedonistic side of the counterculture movement of the 60s that was really had its impetus from the God is dead thing. And the 60s had a lot of, new art and new fashions and new music styles, psychedelia, rock and roll. There was tie-dye clothing. There was this influence of massive influence of Eastern philosophy and Eastern fashions in the Western world. There was a huge flood of ideas. There was not new, but a renewed interest in Eastern religions and Hinduism and Buddhism and meditation and esoteric practices, Sufism. Now, a lot of this stuff started with the God is dead thing, but I mean, even that was bogus. That was a bit bogus in the 60s because God is dead was a thing dreamed up by Friedrich Nietzsche at the end of the 19th century. And Friedrich Nietzsche was a philosopher who was big in the 1880s, and by the 1960s, he was one of those German philosophers who'd been, so discussed, so read, so done over and redone over by 1,000 PhD students, and Nietzsche wasn't really much. He was just a pretty average, basically Platonic pagan philosopher who basically abandoned Christianity for Neoplatonism, and that's not. He wasn't the only guy to do that, and he wasn't a particularly eloquent or imaginative or forceful advocate of this neo-paganism. But saying in the 60s that God is dead, and that's like it's a new thing. Why was Nietzsche's ideas bold and new and exciting and daring and confronting in the 1960s when the guy had been dead forever, like 70 years or he'd been dead for over 50 years. So, it's a bit bogus. And see what a lot of things that went on with the 1960s were there was this hedonistic streak to what's going on, like make love not war led to this a kind of thing like hedonism, there was this idea of there's these neo-Marxist ideas of communal living, communal property, socialist revolutions, overthrowing the established order, replacing it with a workers' paradise, and a lot of people in the 60s just bought it. I mean, they bought it. They bought into these ideas, and a lot of them just dropped in university. 60s was the age for communes. Communes were huge. Communist communes, Marxist communes, vegetarian communes, Buddhist communes, kind of Hindu type communes. Communes became really, free love, nudist colonies, and that was the other side of the hippie movement was hedonism. I mean, you'd get people who would go to rock concerts or festivals and they'd go back to someone's place or some kind of public building, some kind of hotel or something, and they would all sit around and smoke marijuana and take LSD and hallucinogenic drugs and then proceed to have orgies. I mean, a love-in is an orgy. I mean, just simply put. And and when you say, I mean, a lot of the communes that were popular in the 1960s were in fact nudist colonies and places where there was an ethos of free love, which meant, well, everyone having sex with everyone else, either in pairs or together in a group. I mean, this was, free love meant an orgy, basically. And so that was part of the 1960s ethos, was the abandonment of traditional morality and Christian morality to moral relativism, which was I mean, not something even Nietzsche recommended, but who knows? The thing was, in the 1960s, you had a generation of people, well, they were told basically to abandon all the things they'd been taught as young people. Like, never trust anyone over 40 was this thing. They were told never trust anyone over 40. The religion is just the opiate of the people. It's like this Marxist thing. Religious prescriptions are just there to reinforce the will of the ruling class. all that sort of thing. So yeah, you know, free your minds. Your parents are squares. Free your minds from all the trappings, all the rules. You've got nothing to lose but your chains. Think outside the box, whatever. They never said that, but this whole idea of, you know, breaking the rules, being bold and daring, was a very attractive idea. I mean, it's always a potent idea to any young person who encounters it. And there's some background to it, and that is the Michael Tal, the famous he's a Latvian chess champion, but he was a Soviet chess champion from a Jewish background, Michael Tal. But he was he actually became world chess champion for a year. In 1960 or one or something. But the thing was, Michael Tal was this incredibly bold, innovative, daring, sacrificing, swashbuckling, brilliant, attacking chess player who was a real inspiration to a lot of people. But you see, in the this all comes from the 1920s. Then there was a chess school there was this school of chess thinking called the hypermodern school, who had this slogan: the general rule is there's no general rule. And there was a handful of very good chess players who were adherents to this philosophy, and they invented hypermodern type openings, or they invented a lot of the hypermodern openings. Reti, Nimzovich, Gyula Breyer. There was a whole lot of really good chess players who were into this sort of thing. And the hypermodern school was very influential, and it was taken up in the 30s and 40s and the 50s. I mean, especially the Soviets got onto this idea of asymmetric chess play, where you could sacrifice material for other advantages, for attacking opportunities, or for time or for space. Or there's this idea of asymmetric warfare contained within the hypermodern chess idea. Now, of course, to say, it's quite a profound idea to say the general rule is there's no general rule. And I mean, that you can say that holds in a lot of things in life, in ethics or economics, or many things in life. I like that, but I mean that's the problem, is this sloganeering, and sloganeering was really big in the 60s. The problem with sloganeering is it tends to gloss over the difficulties of what people are proposing. I mean, the 1960s counterculture generation, in a way, rejected all the things their parents had taught them. But in a way, they ended up learning the hard way. They ended up spending 20 years learning the hard way. Nudist colonies, free love communities, venereal diseases used to go through like a shot. And yeah, people who experimented with drugs found that a lot of the hallucinations were just a dead end of just incoherent craziness, and that the drug addiction was counterproductive and destructive, and yeah, and that people didn't really want free love. They didn't want free love communities with children running around with no one who knew who their fathers were. And in a way, you see, there are some sound principles that traditional society does pass down from generation to generation that aren't just there to protect the ruling class. They're lessons that everyone has to know, and if anyone breaks them, there's rich or poor. There's consequences to be faced. I mean, saying your parents are squares, they've told you all these lies, they just don't want you to enjoy your life. Well, it's a bit like somebody telling children, don't listen to your parents. Touch the stove. Touch the stove. The stove isn't hot. Run with knives. Run with scissors. Just, enjoy your life. Free your mind. Drive on the other side of the road, man. Think freely. Think that's, I mean, there's this idea of abandoning principles has to be looked at very carefully. I mean, society has rules, like drive on where it depends on where you live in the world. But say if you live in Britain, or drive on the left. Keep left. Don't drive on the right. You'll just smash into somebody who's driving on the left. On his left. I mean, there's social rules. A lot of them there for good reasons, and there's moral rules in life that are there for good reasons, and you break them at your peril, frankly. And that's the difficulty with the 60s move, with the 60s ethos. A lot of people died young, experimenting, with died young, but they do today, overdosing on heroin. But and the free love and the ethos of the 1960s led to the 70s, and more iconoclastic overthrowing of traditional social norms. And so we had the gay rights movement, and we had the nascent transgender thing, and these transhumanist movements started to rear their heads in the 60s and 70s, and then we had the AIDS plague, which killed. AIDS was like this, it really was like a guy with a scythe, an old-fashioned scythe, when he goes boom and cuts through the wheat, boom, it just goes a whole wave of this stuff just goes down. I mean, that was like, that's what AIDS was like. It was like there was a bunch of guys attacking, marching up to attack an enemy trench, and then the machine gun goes da da da, and they all just fall in like a row.